Hi everyone, my name is Gray Scott, and this is another live edition of Futuristic Now. I am a futurist and a techno-philosopher, and for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is an ongoing series that I created for people who are interested in the future and where we're going to be as a species and how we will behave in the future. So thanks for joining me. So today's episode is about the future of privacy. And let me see if I can keep this camera in focus for us here. So today's episode is the future of privacy. And what I really wanted to focus on today specifically is the idea of privacy and if we can maintain privacy in a digital future, meaning that can we maintain privacy when data is everywhere? Can we maintain privacy when everything is a computer in the future? So that's where I want to. That's sort of where I want to start with this today. So I think the first thing that we should think about is where we are right now, and then I will take you through a bridge of where we're going to be in, let's say, 2025 or 2050. So I think the first thing to think about is the idea that data is the new oil. Think of data as the new oil and we are producing it individually, right? So everything that we do online, all of that data, has value. And so what do we do in a future where data is everywhere, where everything is a computer, where the Internet of Everything is everywhere, it's ubiquitous, and we're constantly producing data and adding that into the digital world? Now, there's some philosophical questions here that we should really be thinking about. The first one really that I'm concerned with is the value of that data. Why is that data valuable? Part of the reason is that someone is trying to sell you something, right? That's one of the easiest ways to think about it. The second reason that the data is valuable is because people want to maybe control us or control our behaviors. So that's a second factor in this. And the third is really on the positive side is that all of that data can help us become a better species, run cities more efficiently, live better lives. So that's the third component. So you're really looking at three different tiers of this, of the future of privacy. So let's take the first one. The idea that the data that we're producing could be used against us, right? Think about that. You know, obviously I'm doing this episode because of what happened with Facebook recently. And the thing that's interesting is, especially when you work in foresight, is that I talked about Cambridge Analytica a year ago when really the public was just starting to hear little rumors about this company. But I did sort of some background research, and I found the lineage of what this company had done and what they were doing. And I thought it was so interesting because the idea that I think it started as a Harvard project and got co-opted into something else. So what I find interesting here is that is the third component of the digital future and the privacy of our future, is that information, that data that we were producing is being used against us in a lot of ways. Now that can be used in political arenas, that can be used for commercial gain. But what I really want to focus on today is how does the future look if money and commerce and all of that gets disrupted by blockchain, universal basic income, all of those things? How does the future look? How is that data going to be used commercially if we have more equality in the future? If we have less, we know that we'll have more problems with our data in the future because that data will be more valuable for people who want to control our spending behaviors and our political behaviors. So that's something to think about. The other aspect of this is that as we move further and further into the future, we are going to produce data in real time from our sensorial bodies. And that information will be put into the digital world. And so that value is in real time. And that's something to think about, because as your behaviors change, as you move forward with your life and your behaviors change, that data will reflect your spending habits. It will reflect all of the things that you do sensorially, all of your experiences. That will transform the world around us. So it's a multi-layered, very complex issue. There are lots of sides and lots of ways to think about this. Now, we've known for a very long time that this is coming. We have known that data was going to be an issue in the futurology field for a very long time. Futurists have been telling us this, and science fiction has been writing about this. And so I don't know why, and I actually said this recently, I'm not sure why this was such a surprise to so many people. The first thing I want to say, and you're not going to want to hear this, is we are all responsible for what happened with Facebook. And we are not responsible for their behavior and the way that they used our data, but we allowed that to happen. As unfortunate as that is, and I know that some of you are going to be angry to hear that, but we have to take responsibility for our own data. We are the caretakers of our data. So, I wasn't surprised by it. I'd known for a very long time that that privacy, as we know it now, has completely changed. So, I think part of what we need to focus on here is, I'm sorry, my camera keeps jumping in and out of focus. I'll have to fix that for next episode. This is live. So I know that a lot of people don't want to hear that about us being a part of the problem, but really we are. We have been so eager to use these free services and these apps and log in, and I'm just as guilty as anyone else. Partly because I know how much data I put out there. I try to keep and make an effort to make sure that I keep certain things private, location and things like that. But none of that is inaccessible. I mean, most people can find anything they want about you online now. And the data is out there. If you use your credit card, I mean, seriously, the amount of data that's out there is unbelievable. So I think part of the problem is, for example, I'll give you an example of this. So it's so easy to log into external websites now using Facebook, and I was doing it for a while. But what you don't realize is that when you do that, you're giving that app permission to talk to Facebook, and also in a lot of, unless you're very careful about what you sign up for, some of those privacy agreements allow that company to look at your friends and your family's information as well. So that convenience that we're looking at in the future is going to be a problem for us. Do we want convenience in the future? Do we want privacy? Or do we want both? How do we attain both? How do we enable that amount of data to be out in the digital cosmos and still keep that private and keep ourselves safe? Well, this goes back to more of a philosophical question. And this is really what Futuristic Now is about, is the idea that we are not separate entities. We are actually merging in a lot of ways. And a lot of topical conversations about technology, that's not the conversation you're going to hear. You're going to hear what you heard in the beginning of this conversation, which is the details of the data. What you have to actually realize is that the transparency that's going on right now in the digital world, if you really looked and peered inside of that digital world that's already being created and you're a part of it, and your data is a part of it, if you looked at that, you would see very quickly that all of that information is readily available if you know where to look. Where you ate last night, who your friends are, who your partners are, where you went to college, all that stuff. That's the simple layer. The sort of deeper layer is what triggers your behavioral reactions. And now we're talking about the idea of behavioral analytics and predictive analytics, meaning that we know enough about the brain now that we can trigger certain behaviors just by using data and showing you certain things. That's a little scary, but that's exactly where we are. We're way past that now. So the philosophical question that I want to get to now in the conversation is, if we are becoming a technological species, which I think we are, if we are moving towards a digital cosmos where the boundaries between the individual is fading away, how do we deal with that as a species that has been, in a lot of ways, separated? You know, we think of ourselves as these separate individuals. That is obviously an illusion, and it's going to become more of a reality that we are not separate in the future as our data becomes more intertwined. So that is an ego issue for us. That is an issue for us to think about as a species, and where we are moving towards as a species and how we're evolving into the future. I mean, these are huge questions, and it's not going to be a conversation about Facebook. It's not going to be a conversation about political propaganda. Those conversations are topical, and we should have them, but that's not the big conversation here. The real conversation here is what we want to be, who we want to be. That's the deeper futuristic conversation that we should be having. And so when you have people who are sort of still dealing in the topical layer of this conversation, instead of the David Lynch layer, which is where which is where we're going to. We're going down into the David Lynch layer, the sort of unconscious layer of the digital future and the future of privacy. Then you have to start thinking, well, if we have digital telepathy in the future, if we implant our brains with computer chips, and I can speak to you wherever you are in the world, and you can speak to me, and I can hear you, and listen, all of those technologies are in the works. Those are emerging technologies that are coming. So how do we deal with that? I mean, Facebook, that conversation, by the time 2025, 2035 arrives, that conversation will seem so antiquated, because we will be in a new world. I mean, literally in a new world. And that paradigm is so disruptive to us as a species. It's disruptive to us as human beings. Our psychology, our physiological bodies, that none of the structures that we have right now, none of us really are prepared for this. I mean, a lot of futurists throughout history have been talking about these major shifts that happen, and you'll hear a lot about exponential shifts and exponential change in technology, but where's the exponential change in our psychology and our evolution? I mean, this is part of the sort of transhuman idea, is that we may need to use technology to keep up with the technology that's emerging, which is very strange, because you're starting to see this technological backlash right now. We're starting to see people leave other digital platforms, not just Facebook, but you're starting to see people opt out of other startups that are going to also suffer, because a lot of people have been so frightened by what's happened with Facebook that I think there's this backlash. And we're talking billions and billions of dollars that Facebook lost in the last couple of weeks. Billions of dollars. That kind of disruption and that lesson was something that, if you talk to any futurist, most of us knew that this was coming. The way that Facebook was set up, the behavior that they had shown in the past was not conducive to privacy. It just wasn't. Part of the problem, and I'll go back to us all being responsible for this, is part of the problem is that we were so eager to use this free service that we just gave our data away. And I'm not sure if everyone thinks of Facebook as what it really is. It's really a digital community board. You're literally putting up your thoughts into the public space. And you see people having private conversations in the comments underneath what they post all the time. Well, what they think is private, I guess. Either that or they don't care that they're putting that information out into the world. And I'm just as guilty as anyone else. We are all responsible for what happened because we did not demand a platform that didn't value our privacy. The other part of this is that the monetary system that Facebook has in place is, and for them to survive, is all about advertising. So micro-targeting as well, micro-targeting advertising. So they need to know you extremely well so that they can show you the ads that are going to be valuable to the advertisers. That's where the money is coming from. So here's another question. Can we, and eventually I think we will, can we live in a future where we are not the product and where advertising is not valued more than the human being? And that's a profound question. And so that's where we have to get. We have a lot of corporate systems in place right now that make it very difficult to unravel ourselves from this privacy future that we're headed towards. We're going to have to unravel ourselves from this advertising structure where your attention, literally your attention, is the value. And that, unfortunately, is where we have to move away from that. Which is a lot of the reason why all the platforms that I've been using and YouTube as well, I don't advertise. I prefer not to have advertising there. I would prefer to have people, because I have a Patreon page, and I prefer to have people give to that so that they show that they care about the value of what I'm creating, instead of me trying to find out everything I can about you, use your data against you, and try to sell you something or hijack your attention. That doesn't serve my message, and it doesn't serve us as a species. It won't serve us in the future. So Facebook is not the only company. A lot of the digital companies have gotten into this problem. And we're going to see more of this. But the real disruption here is trying to figure out how we can build platforms and how we can get each other to value and pay for things that we value. So I said a couple of days ago on my Facebook page that I was shocked that people were surprised that this happened when we're not willing to pay for what we value. And you saw this when music became digital and people were starting to steal music. And I was against that when it happened, because I felt like if I love a musical artist, I want to reward them $1.29, $1.99 for a song that I really love, that influences your life and that you carry with you, and that's not worth $1.99 to reward that artist. And I never did that. I never stole music. And a lot of my friends did. A lot of people did. I'm sure some of you watching did. That is part of the problem, is that we don't value what people are producing. So, and it's not a lot of money. I mean, even if it's just, a dollar here or a dollar there for things that you really value, if we can do that instead of using advertising as the structure, then our data takes on a different purpose, a different meaning. The data is about providing you the content that you like, the individual, right? So the middleman gets stripped out, and when it comes to privacy, then you're just dealing with putting out data, and that data is not being used to promote ads to sell you things. So that, I think, is part of where we're going to head in the future, is sort of unraveling ourselves from this advertising world. There are some concerns when we start talking about the Internet of Everything, and when everything is a computer in the future. That was the second statement I made in the beginning of this video. the idea that everything will be a computer in the future, not just that you have to worry about your data in social media networks, that you actually have to worry about your chair in your office recording your heartbeat. Think about it. Your pencils, your pens, your laptops, your smart glasses, your smart suit that you'll be wearing in the future, your smart contacts, every single thing that gets near our bodies or that exists in our environment will be a computer, because the computer chips are getting smaller and smaller. So IBM just came out they just announced the world's smallest computer. It's smaller than a grain of sand. And that move towards miniaturization is going to enable us to put computers in everything, so that everything is a computer, every piece of clothing, everything. So that's the future we're headed towards. So we need to make some serious decisions. And I think it's good that we are sort of all making a statement. A lot of people have deleted their Facebook accounts. A lot of people are really starting to read those privacy statements now, and a lot of you are surprised at what's in there. The fact that Facebook can look at your phone calls and who you called. They have a list of your phone calls. Even if you weren't aware of that, that's one of the things that's happening. So there's a lot of philosophical questions to be answered here. And if we don't, as a group of people, this is not just for the technology elite. This is not just for the academics. This is for every single one of you that's watching. We have to all make a decision about what kind of future we want to live in, and what the price, literally, what the price of our data should be. And is it that we are moving towards a future where we're becoming a homogenized species, where we are computationally and behaviorally monetized, and almost sort of a hive mind effect, where all of our data is visible and anybody can access that? That, I think, is where we're headed. Question is, how do we protect ourselves? Should we have to protect ourselves? I fought back and forth with some of these questions, and over the last 2 weeks, I've thought a lot about, because let me say this: it's never about the issue. The issue is just the Band-Aid. You have to pull that back and see what's really going on. And when we start talking about privacy, it's not about Facebook. It's not about advertising. It's not about any of that. It's about us. It's about trying to figure out how we can accomplish and how we can arrive in a future that is filled with equality and abundance and not scarcity, and a future that is filled with ads that pop up all the time uncontrollably, so that you're constantly bombarded with someone trying to control and hijack your attention. That does not sound like the future that we want to be in. So I would love to hear what you guys are thinking, some of your questions. I see that you guys are leaving some comments here. So Seeking Delphi is saying that one of the speakers that you interviewed at South by Southwest said that she thinks by 2025 we'll spend more time talking to AI than to other human beings. I actually think that's true to a certain degree. I think that AI will supplement your unconscious mind in a lot of ways. And that leads us back into privacy. So if you have a conversational, contextual AI that's with you all the time, that is the kind of AI that's conversational, where you can have context, where you can talk about your history, and it can remind you of things, and it can tell you stories, and it can remind you of old stories that you told it. And there's this relationship that's a deeper relationship than what we have today. the real question for that system is, who's in control of that data? Is it yours? Is it, sorry, my camera keeps going in and out of focus. Is that data yours? Is it a company who creates the AI? Is it on a blockchain? So maybe there is some sort of ability to keep that, a record of that and where that technology goes, maybe. So that's a good question. And yeah, so outsiders saying, imagine talking to an AI that knows everything about you. Well, I think it's even deeper than knowing everything about you. It's actually predicting what you want. So take it even further. It's not so much that the AI in the future, and we're talking about quantum AI. So this machine in the future, this software that will follow you around in the future, it's not so much that it knows everything about you. It actually knows more about you than you know about yourself. And that is profound. That is a profound statement, because we need to make sure we have the ability to either keep control of that or change the paradigm of the structure that we're living in now so that that doesn't get used against us. You know, and really the way to do that is to make that data and controlling your attention less valuable to these advertisers. If they know that they can't control your behavior or predict your behavior and use that against you to get you to buy something, then that will change the structure and how it's used. So it goes deeper than just knowing everything about you. It goes to an AI that can predict your behavior or predict your desires. And we really don't want bad actors to have that kind of access to our data, and we don't want them to have that kind of access to us and who we are. So it's very critical for us to start having these deeper conversations about technology. So it's not just about the privacy contracts. It's not just about Facebook and how they're behaving. It's not about all these other startups that are trying to follow in Facebook's steps, because Facebook has set an example for how to behave, and a lot of these startups are starting to mimic that behavior, which is unfortunate. And I think if startups really pay attention to what's going on, they're going to and if they're smart, they're going to realize that they can evade and avoid going through what Facebook is going through, because they will if they go down that path of using our data against us. Now, I'm not going to get into the political part of this, because that's maybe for another show, but that is a part of it too, is this idea of computational propaganda and getting us to sort of change our minds about politics and alter our way of thinking about things, and questioning what we think in ways that maybe we wouldn't have if that propaganda wasn't there. So that's another aspect of this. I think that's for a different show. So I will ask for the people who are watching, thank you guys for leaving comments, but I will ask you sort of a direct, deeper question. And this is a question that's not about the details of privacy. It's not about any law that can be passed. It's not about any contract that can be signed. If where we're heading is where I think we're heading, and where the evidence points, which is that we're moving towards a singularity, and we're moving towards a simulated future, a digital future, and we're becoming a technological species. If that's the case, how will we behave and feel in a digital world where everything is transparent? Because I actually don't know that you can have a conscious experience in the digital world and not have transparency. It would actually be very hard. You would need access to people's data to understand them, to merge with their experiences. So there's a lot of complexity built around the idea of privacy, and it's not just about who gets to advertise to us. I'm just going to scroll through some of your comments here. So someone was mentioning about the idea of credit cards and tracking. What if in the future, let me paint a picture of you. Let me paint a picture for you of 2045. Okay. You wake up in the morning and there are no credit cards. There are no cell phones. Your DNA is how you pay. Your DNA is what tracks you. And that is profound. But not only your DNA, your psychological profile, your brain waves, you have some sort of EEG system either implanted or you wear an EEG system all the time so that you're constantly sending your thoughts and your brain waves into the digital platform. So your existence, the data that you produce just by existing is your worth, it is your voice, it is your identity, right? So it's not about how you look in the future, it's not about a photo in the future, your photo ID, it's not about a number. All of that fades away. And it's all about your mind and your DNA. So now we're inside of your mind, we're inside of your body. That kind of future leads to profound disruptions. And we need to start thinking about how to unravel ourselves from an old economic system. Now I'm getting into the Venus Project and Jacques Fresco and his work. Huge fan of his work. Maybe this forces us, the transparency that's coming with data, maybe that forces us to move into a horizontal economic system, which I think is where we are going to be forced to go. This is a very complex idea, and there are lots of different components to this. So one component of this is automation. As automation increases, people lose jobs and have to relocate. There's a mass migration to different areas of work. So it's not that all the jobs are going to go away. A majority of the jobs will, but people will also be moving into new sectors and learning new skills. So there's that. If that happens, if there's a basic universal income that gets passed, hopefully there will be. If globalization takes over and nationalism fades, which it should, and we start to realize that we are all connected and that we are the keepers for each other and we are responsible for each other, and we can create this horizontal economic system where the least of us, the people that have the people that are in poverty, the people that need the most help, get the help they need. If we can create this horizontal economic system and increase equality, then the idea of privacy shifts. The fear sort of falls away because you're not afraid that someone's going to take what you own, or they're not going to steal your money, or they're not. If all of your needs are provided for, and if your neighbor's needs are provided for, that's going to shift, hopefully, and move us into more of a horizontal economic system. I'm hoping that the pressure that privacy will put on us and the transparency of our data, and there's no way to avoid that now. Unfortunately, I know some of you don't want to hear this, and I know that it's a little frightening, but we are way past that now. We are in the age of transparency, and there is very little you could do now to avoid being tracked. Having data that is unconscious, sort of this unconscious behavioral data. A lot of companies already have that on you. It's very hard to get away from that. You would have to drop off, technologically, you would have to drop off completely. And even then, the first time you go to a doctor, a file is created and you're back on the system. So we are well into the age of transparency now. So what I would love to address sort of at the end of this now is how we live in an age of horizontal economic equality. What does that look like? Where privacy is an issue of the past, where we're not afraid of someone stealing our bank account number, where we're not afraid of someone hacking into our car and driving us off the road, where we're not afraid of someone embarrassing us or using intimate details about our lives against us. Is that a future that we can get to? Or is all of this privacy and the pressure of privacy going to disrupt us as a species? So some of these, hey Kevin, glad you could make it onto the show. The age of transparency is the age of questions. It's true. You're absolutely right. Deeper questions. I mean, the age of transparency, I mean, we are in the age of transparency. I mean, that's why you're seeing this crunch starting to happen where people are starting to look at technology as more of an ecosystem instead of some sort of gadget or a code. And that ecosystem, that digital cosmos that we're moving towards has built into it. It has the history of us as a species. It has our evolutionary history built into the system itself. So I think it was one of the, I'll put this up for you guys so you can see it. I've said this before, that technology is a reflection of who we are. And that's just a very simple way of looking at what technology really is, how technology relates to our privacy in the future, and what our history is, how that will shift our evolution in the future. So everything that we are, all of our psychological profile data, all of our evolutionary history, everything that we are will be reflected in the technologies that we create. This is why you're seeing what's going on with Facebook happening. That's us. That is us being reflected. That is the people that created that platform being reflected. And what's being reflected for them right now is probably pretty uncomfortable. They are realizing that they've probably made some mistakes. What they do with that, and where they take that in the future will be really interesting. But what I'm starting to see is an adjustment, a realignment, a rethinking of the value of people. That should be our first and primary goal, is the value of us, not the value of our data, not how much money we have, not how attractive we are, what our influence is, if we're a billionaire or not. That all of that stuff, that is not the true value of what we are and who we are. And that's going to come to bear when all of us get closer and closer and closer, as I've said to you many times before on the show, that the future is a portal inward. As we become closer and closer digitally, and as we become more connected and more transparent, we're going to realize that what's really important is how we treat each other and the value of our fellow human beings. That is the true value of us. So I don't know what it's going to take for us to start to realize that. I think you're starting to see these major events, these waves that are happening right now. You're starting to see some of that reflection. It's finally, the light is finally reaching us. It's gone out and now it's coming back. So, Seeking Delphi, take care. Thank you. So Dale is saying we might consider that privacy is a concept that has not always been important to folks. We do evolve. Well, this is, Dale, you actually bring up something that's really interesting. So you're right. The idea of transparency and the idea of privacy has shifted over the course of our evolution. There was, obviously as we've evolved, we've gone through periods where there was zero privacy because we were in an ecosystem where we weren't wearing clothes and we were in, we were swimming in the ocean, we were crawling out of the mud. That system of privacy made no sense in the beginning of our evolution. So as we've evolved, we've created this paradigm, this thing that we call privacy. And you're right, Dale, the idea is a man-made concept. It is a paradigm, it's a symbol. A lot of ways, privacy is a symbol for our fear. I'm afraid of what you're going to think if you know my thoughts, or I don't want you to know my thoughts because you might use it against me. And we have all those things running in the back of our minds in the unconscious. And that is the true essence of our evolution, is that we are going through stages. We've gone through stages of privacy, and the antiquated stage of privacy that we're out of now, the sort of traditional stage of privacy, we've moved out of that into the age of transparency. And some of it is unconscious transparency, like the digital data that is on all of you that's out there watching this, that data that exists on you even though you don't know what it is. You'd be surprised if you knew, I'm sure. I'm sure all of us would. That is the new transparent stage, whether forced or whether we bought into that and don't care about it. There are people that say they want complete privacy, and yet they want to hack into other people's accounts. That is, to me, unbelievable. I'm a supporter of beneficial hacking because I think that it helps us move forward and create better software and better systems so that we don't end up letting our data get into the hands of people who really want to do us harm. But that idea of bad actors existing in the first place is really the heart of this. So it's not a privacy problem. It's a human issue. It's a human problem. It's a psychological problem. It's a philosophical issue. It's the deeper part of the spectrum is how we want to behave in the future as a species if everyone knows everything about you. And can we get to a place where we can be at peace with each other? So maybe some of you that started this live broadcast thought we were going to talk about contracts and clouds and governance of data, but that's not what this is about. And I hope that this episode gets you guys to think on a deeper level, and I hope that it allows you and enables you to have that discussion with your friends and family. You might surprise them, and you might be surprised by what they say about privacy. That if you really started asking, and if you really start having this conversation, which I think we should, that it's not about the data, it's about how people feel around people who they can trust. Can we trust each other? Are we going to live in a future where we trust each other is the real question here. That is the most profound question. In a transparent future, can we trust each other? And why can't we trust each other now? And how can we fix that? Every futurist throughout history, every profound futurist throughout history has asked this question. And I say this because, and this is just a sci-fi reference, but do you want to be on a spaceship with someone that you can't trust? Do you want to take people to Mars with you that you cannot trust? We are taking our fellow human beings with us into the future. And we may not agree with those people, some of those people. We may not agree with each other on everything, but we have to increase our empathy. We have to increase our respect for each other as much as we can. And we have to try to be able to trust each other. Without that, and without us evolving into that world, into that kind of species, into that kind of human being, dystopia is what we will find if we're not careful. And so, I love the work of Jacques Fresco and FM 2030 and Buckminster Fuller and Arthur C. Clarke and all of these futurists that have asked this question over and over again and tried to create a conversation around the deeper issue here, that the technology was just a scaffolding. The spaceships were just a scaffolding for what the real story was. And the real story was us. I always think about 2001 when the monolith appears and the primates are stroking the monolith. And I always think I've had different theories about, for myself, what the monolith represents. For a while I thought, oh, that's technology. It's this new thing that's emerging and we have no idea how to deal with it. And we're trying to get some sort of sensorial feedback from it. And it's a great metaphor for what I think now. I think is that is a great metaphor for the unconscious, the deeper context of what it means to be human. So I will end this with just this thought, that the future of privacy is not about data. The future of privacy is about trust. It's about us. It's about us being able to live in a transparent future and how we do that. So let's hope for the best. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for the comments and the questions. And I hope that this is helpful to get you guys to think on a deeper level about the future of privacy. So that's it for today. Please share this video and make sure you guys subscribe. And that's it. Hopefully you guys will have a great day and take care.